I lost my legs to save Leo. For 3 years of marriage, he allowed his friends and family to humiliate me. When I confronted him, he pressed his fingers against his temple impatiently and said, "They're just speaking the truth. Back then, I never begged you to save me. No one ever asked if I wanted it." At that moment, all the admiration I had for him in my youth turned to ashes. That night, I laced his milk with sleeping pills. While he slept, I severed his legs. I fell asleep to his screams of agony, but when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 3 years earlier, before the accident. Chapter 1. Leo is really something. Staying with a cripple for 3 years. You don't get it, do you? Maybe Leo has some kind of fetish. That cripple must be good in bed. Hee hee. I think Julia is just manipulative, tying Leo down for life with one leg. Laughter filled the private room in the hotel as I stood outside the door, clenching my fists. The laughter finally died down, and then I heard Leo's deep voice. "That's enough." Someone feigned surprise. "No way. Don't tell me you're actually in love with that cripple?" There was a long silence before I heard. "How could I be? What I mean is, I don't have any weird fetishes. Honestly, it's exhausting seeing her every day. If it weren't for what happened 3 years ago." "Julia? What are you doing here?" The door to the room opened, and all eyes turned to me, mocking, pitying, but not surprised. For a moment, Leo looked flustered and guilty. He strode toward me, his tone full of blame. "You know your condition. What are you doing here?" Sitting in my wheelchair, I met his gaze and silently raised my phone. "You told me to come an hour ago." Leo had texted me, saying he was drunk and needed me to pick him up. Leo pushed me into the room, closing his eyes with a sigh. "Happy now?" The man who had mocked me earlier raised his hand with a grin. "Sorry, Julia. We were just joking around. We wanted to see how much you care about Leo." He claimed they had sent the text from Leo's phone to test how much I loved him. None of them bothered to hide the disdain in their voices. I looked at Leo in confusion. He seemed to have known all along. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said, rubbing his temples. "Honestly, think about it. Even if I were drunk, there are drivers and friends. Anyone could have taken me home. What could you even do?" I followed his gaze down to my legs. What could I do? Rush out the door in my wheelchair the moment I got his text? Beg the driver to carry me into the cab? Looking back now, I really was foolish. I had handed myself over as the punchline to their joke. "Since you're fine, I'll go home now." I lowered my head and turned my wheelchair to leave, but someone stuck out a foot, blocking my way. "Don't leave so quickly, Julia. It's rude not to have a drink now that you're here." Someone handed me a glass of alcohol, but I was allergic to it. I looked at Leo again, and once more. He said nothing. Facing a room full of mocking stares, I silently took the glass. "Haha, she's really..." "Wait. What the?" A startled shout erupted as I threw the drink in his face. "You crippled bee." "Ah." I switched my wheelchair to electric mode and rolled mercilessly over the foot blocking my path. Behind me, curses filled the air, but I ignored them, thoughtfully shutting the door to the private room as I left. Chapter 2. Leo ran after me, immediately launching into a tirade. "Julia, don't go too far. They're my friends." He reached out to grab me, but I blocked his hand. "They're your friends, but I'm your wife. You know how to stand up for your friends. But when your wife gets humiliated, you just stand by and watch." Leo pressed his lips together, his usual reaction when he knew he was wrong but refused to admit it. Suddenly, I felt exhausted. I turned my wheelchair toward the exit. Just as I reached the door, he caught up with me again. They were a bit out of line, but what they said was also true. I didn't care to listen to his excuses. I rubbed my damp eyes and tried to keep my voice steady. "Let's get a divorce." Chapter 3. Leo froze, blurting out his refusal. "No, I won't divorce you." I looked at him, confused. "Why not?" I had heard it with my own ears. He said he didn't like me. I used to convince myself that even if his friends didn't accept me, it didn't matter as long as he loved me. That was enough. But after hearing those words tonight, I finally realized how foolish I had been. The night breeze was chilly. Leo took off his jacket and draped it over my legs. "It's my fault. What I said earlier was drunken nonsense. Don't believe it. We're not getting a divorce. Just trust me, okay? The scent of Leo's mint cologne surrounded me, and I couldn't hold back my tears. He pushed my wheelchair down the crowded street. Let's go home. Chapter 4. He pushed me slowly along the streets at night. He seemed to be lost in thought, so much so that he didn't notice the pothole ahead. I spoke up to remind him. After a quick apology, silence returned. I opened my mouth slightly. I hope you know, if you think this is too much trouble, if you don't love me, we can get a divorce. I've liked Leo for 10 years, but that doesn't mean I'll cling to him desperately. Leo's voice sounded displeased. I already said we're not getting a divorce. Julia. I closed my eyes and said nothing more as memories from the past kept surfacing. 3 years ago, when the lab ceiling collapsed, I instinctively pushed Leo out of the way. I saved him, but I was hit and lost consciousness. That day, I had planned to confess my feelings to him, hoping to end my 7 years of unspoken love with an answer. When I woke up from the coma, the first thing I saw was Leo's reddened eyes. Julia, do you have a death wish? Who told you to meddle? I opened my mouth but found my voice was hoarse. I wanted to tell him it was fine because I liked him and also wanted to repay his family's kindness. My parents passed away when I was very young. If it weren't for Leo's family helping me all these years, my life might have been miserable. I tried to get out of bed to pour myself a glass of water, only to realize my legs had no sensation. Leo's eyes filled with even more guilt. He grabbed my hand. From now on, I'll be your legs. Julia, let's get married. I admit that moment, I was overwhelmed by happiness. Okay, Leo, actually, I've liked you for 7 years. Leo held my hand tightly without saying a word. I instinctively ignored the faint reluctance in his eyes. Chapter 5. When I woke up in the morning, Leo was already gone. On the bedside table was a glass of warm milk he had prepared for me. Work has been busy lately. Don't wait for me to have dinner. I took a sip of the milk. It was sweet, but I never liked sweet milk. The sound of loud banging came from outside, followed by a sharp voice yelling, "Good morning, sis-in-law." It was Leo's cousin, Elise. I sighed, thinking to myself that this was going to be trouble. Elise walked in and hugged me affectionately, but her eyes were full of mockery. "Sis-in-law, you sure know how to cause trouble for my brother." At last night's banquet, there were several important connections my brother needed to make, but thanks to your little outburst, he's in big trouble now. So, what do you suggest we do, sis-in-law? I looked at Elise calmly. You can tell Leo to divorce me. After the rush of happiness faded, I occasionally sensed Leo's helplessness. He always kept a polite distance from me. Even his friends weren't always like this toward me. I actually understood. They were just voicing what Leo couldn't say. So I had suggested more than once that if this was all because of gratitude, it wasn't necessary, we could get a divorce. But he always refused. Elise sneered. You don't seriously think my brother isn't divorcing you because he likes you, do you? She forcibly dragged me into the wheelchair. I struggled, but it was useless. What can a cripple do to resist? She leaned close to my ear and whispered with a laugh. Come on, let's go watch the show. Chapter 6. Elise's so-called show turned out to be Leo on a date with another girl. Through the glass window of the couple's restaurant, I saw Leo gently brushing a stray strand of hair from the girl's forehead. His eyes were overflowing with affection. Elise smirked and gestured toward them. See that? That's the person my brother actually likes. I couldn't understand. Then why won't he divorce me? I wasn't the one clinging desperately. Elise snapped. Isn't it because you manipulated him with that life-saving favor? If he divorces you, what does that make him? An ungrateful jerk. Stop acting so noble. Wasn't this all part of your plan? I couldn't comprehend why everyone thought saving Leo was some calculated scheme. I lost my legs. But he lost his freedom? The two inside were too absorbed in each other to notice me outside the window. I smiled and wheeled closer, tapping lightly on the glass. Elise froze, clearly not expecting me to do that. What are you doing? How amusing. She brought me here, yet expected me to simply watch and wallow in silence. It was too late to stop me. The two inside noticed us. Shock. Panic. Leo quickly appeared in front of me. Julia, listen to me. He didn't know what to say and instead shot an accusatory glare at Elise. Why did you bring her here? Elise pouted in dissatisfaction. I felt bad for the real girlfriend. You two are the ones who've been in love for years. I froze. In love for years? But back when I was about to confess, I had subtly asked Leo if he had a girlfriend. He said no, otherwise, I never would have had the courage. Julia, go home first, Leo said, scolding Elise before calling a car for me. Wait, I raised my hand to stop him. I'd like to have a chat with the lady inside. Julia, Leo frowned, clearly unhappy. I gently took his hand. You'd better listen to me, or I won't mind yelling in public and calling her a mistress. I'm disabled. I've grown immune to judgmental stares over the years. The only ones embarrassed will be you two. Leo's frown deepened, but he clearly cared about the girl inside. The next second, he pushed me into the restaurant. Leo, is this your wife? The one who saved you back then? The girl seemed to know about me. She rested her chin on one hand and smiled at me. Hello, I'm Clara, Leo's first love. Chapter 7. She acted like she had no ill intentions, just like the others, but it was all malice. Leo, can you take your cousin to sit somewhere else? I'd like to have a chat with Miss Julia. With just a few words, she took control of the situation. Leo led Elise to a nearby table, his worried gaze fixed on us. Miss Julia, Clara stirred her coffee leisurely. You know, if it weren't for you, I would be the one married to Leo. I didn't know. I told her. I've never seen you in his circle. I didn't even know he had a first love. Clara lifted her head, her eyes tinged with bitterness. We were in a secret relationship. Because of my family. Leo said his parents wouldn't approve. Only Elise supported us in silence. We dated in secret for 2 years. Before the accident, we were ready to tell our families. But you ruined everything. No wonder Elise hated me so much when she found out I was marrying Leo. But was that my fault? I had confirmed with him multiple times whether he had a girlfriend. It was his choice to hide the truth and his choice to marry me after the accident. Clara saw through my thoughts and laughed lightly. Are you curious why he insisted on marrying you? I looked at her. My instincts told me the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Because he found your diary. Julia. Clara spoke with hatred in her voice. Not before. Not after, but right when you lost your legs and fell into a coma. And he found it in front of his parents. You're going to tell me that wasn't intentional. Miss Julia? My mind went blank. So he had read my diary. Leo originally wanted to pretend he hadn't seen it. But his mother saw it first. His parents meant well. They had watched me grow up. And our families had been friends for years. So that day, his mother asked him, do you like Julia? She probably thought that if there were mutual feelings, then marrying wouldn't be a bad thing. But Leo took it as pressure from his parents. I'll marry her. He gave up Clara and married me because he thought he had no choice. So that's the truth. I thought back to how I had poured out my feelings. Thrilled to know Leo wanted to marry me. What a joke. He can divorce me now. But he hasn't. That's what I didn't understand. Clara sneered. Because you're useful. Leo is at a critical point in his career. If people find out he abandoned the woman who saved his life, what would they think? Miss Julia, you've already made things hard for him once. Don't make it harder a second time. So manipulative, who knows if losing your parents was karma? Aw. Chapter 8. I couldn't hold back. I threw the coffee in her face. She could say anything she wanted, but she shouldn't have brought up my deceased parents. Julia, what are you doing? Leo rushed to shield Clara. I pointed at her. She insulted my parents. Clara looked pitiful, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't. I was just explaining our past. And she. Leo glared at me, full of anger. Apologize. I stared at them for a long time and then laughed. Sure. Before I apologize, can I say something to you? Leo didn't respond, which meant he agreed. Come closer. I'll only tell you this. He leaned in slightly. Slap. I slapped him across the face with all my strength. Let's get a divorce. Leo's face turned completely dark. Julia, I told you, we can't get divorced. Oh, can't get divorced, so he cared that much about his reputation? But this time, I wasn't going to sacrifice myself to maintain his pride, then wait for the lawsuit. I turned my wheelchair to leave, but a strong force yanked me out of it. I was thrown to the ground. Leo's eyes were bloodshot. Divorce? Look at yourself. You're a cripple. Who would want you after me? I stared at him in disbelief, unable to process that these words came from him. Was I born crippled? Leo snapped. Yes. You saved me, you're my benefactor. But did I beg you to save me? Did anyone ask if I wanted this? I'd rather it had been me who was crippled. Do you know how much guilt this has caused me? How much I've lost because of it? He poured out his frustrations, blaming the pressure of owing me his life. I wish you hadn't saved me. I stared at him blankly as a faint odor spread. In the midst of the humiliation, I lost control of my bladder. Seeing this, Leo quickly lifted me back into the wheelchair. Look at yourself. What can you do without me? His eyes were filled with disgust as he covered me with his jacket. I'll take you home. Calm yourself down. Chapter 9. Leo called a car for me. The driver was a chubby middle-aged woman. He gave her extra tips in advance and asked her to help push me back home once we arrived. Perhaps noticing my bad mood, she made a cheering gesture before leaving. Miss, life still has hope. Maybe she was worried I'd hurt myself. I wouldn't, because just half an hour earlier, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a chat. Bro, your wife is dead set on divorcing you. Seems like you can't keep up the devoted husband act anymore. But no worries. If one plan doesn't work, we can switch to another. Remember the boss I mentioned before? He loves playing with disabled women. Julia is perfect for that. Since she's divorcing you anyway, this is the perfect chance to catch her in the act and accuse her of cheating. This way, you won't be blamed for abandoning your savior. Tomorrow night at 9, don't say I never gave you a chance. The messages went on, but it was Leo's simple reply, okay, that broke me completely. How ruthless. He blamed me for saving him, accused me of pressuring him, and now he wanted to wring the last bit of value out of me to clear his name. I didn't know who sent me this text, but whoever it was, I owed them thanks. Chapter 10. Julia. I'm back. Leo returned, reeking of alcohol. He staggered toward me and knelt down. I'm sorry. I was an asshole earlier. Let's not get divorced, okay? I looked at him calmly, then smiled gently. Okay, really? I nodded and handed him a cup of warm milk. I was wrong too about what happened earlier. Drink this milk and sober up. I booked tickets for the Maldives tomorrow. Let's take a trip, okay? Leo first looked panicked, then confused. Tomorrow, let's talk about it tomorrow. All right. I smiled and handed him the milk. Watching him drink it, the drug worked quickly, and as I expected, Leo collapsed unconscious. Chapter 11. Not being able to walk is truly a hassle. It took me 2 whole hours to cut off Leo's legs. He woke up halfway through, screaming like crazy, so I had to stuff a towel into his mouth. He shook his head frantically. I quickly reassured him. Don't worry. I'm not going to kill you. I just need your legs. You don't seem to value them anyway. Might as well give them back to me. He let out muffled sounds, probably begging. I pressed the chat screenshot against his face, and he finally quieted down, leaving only pain and despair. By the time dawn broke, I had finally finished cutting off both legs. The knife had grown dull. Leo passed out and woke up several times, but after I finished, I removed the towel from his mouth. He could barely speak. Jew, whatever. I stuffed the towel back in. I didn't care to listen. I woke up too late. My life was already ruined the moment I lost my legs. Since he wanted to destroy me completely, I had no choice but to destroy him first. I lit charcoal in the room and curled up beside his trembling body. Perfect. At the moment of awakening, I would take this monster with me. Chapter 12. I never thought I'd open my eyes again. The tingling sensation in my legs made me open them wide in shock. I had been reborn, back to before the accident happened. I jumped up, startling everyone in the lab. Julia, are you okay? I looked down at my legs, barely managing to mutter a few words. I was back in my 2nd year of graduate school, the first time. I chose the same major as Leo to be closer to him. I even managed to join the same group, but that accident made me give up my studies. feeling the strength in my legs. I trembled with excitement. It was May 8th, 1:27 p.m., 10 minutes before the ceiling would collapse. In my previous life, I pushed Leo out of harm's way, only to be trapped under the debris myself. Julia, what's wrong? A large hand touched my forehead. It was Leo. Are you feeling unwell? Do you need me to ask for leave for you? I instinctively pulled away from his hand, and I saw a trace of hurt in his eyes. Our strange interaction caught the attention of the others. What's going on? Are the lovebirds fighting? I had always chased after Leo, and he never accepted nor rejected me, leading everyone to jokingly call us lovebirds. No, he has a girlfriend. We have nothing to do with each other. I denied quickly. In this life, I didn't want anything to do with Leo. Leo looked stunned by my quick rejection, especially when I mentioned his secret girlfriend. He lowered his voice. Julia, is there some kind of misunderstanding between us? I stared at him and suddenly understood what felt off between us. Leo had a girlfriend at this time, yet he still acted ambiguously with me. Even now, after I pointed it out, he refused to admit it. Did he want the thrill of an affair while keeping my affection too? Turns out the person I liked had been rotten from the start. Watch out! A shout interrupted my thoughts. The ceiling began to collapse. Just like in my past life, Leo was standing right under it. Meanwhile, I was on the edge of the collapse. Last time, I pushed him out of danger without a second thought. This time, I ran out of the danger zone. Julia? Leo called out to me in disbelief. A second later, the ceiling came crashing down. Leo screamed before losing consciousness. Chapter 13. Out of moral obligation. I still called 911 for Leo. The doctor said Leo's legs were ruined, and he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. I barely managed to hold back my laughter. Julia, why didn't you save me? Leo woke up, his voice hoarse and trembling, as if I were the heartless one. You could have pushed me out of the way. I tilted my head. Leo, drop the act. I know you came back too, before we got married. Leo never called me Julia, and just now he asked why I didn't save him. Exposed. Leo's face flushed. He had tried to take the moral high ground and guilt-trip me. I sat beside him and gently patted his legs. Leo, your legs are useless now. Do you remember what you told me in the last life? Did I beg you to save me? Did anyone ask if I wanted to? I'd rather be the one who was crippled. I smiled at him. Didn't you say you didn't want to be saved? Congratulations. Your wish came true. You don't need to feel guilty about me anymore. You've only lost your legs. But now you can be free, no unnecessary responsibilities to bear. Leo froze, his face shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors. Julia, how did I not realize you were insane before? Can't you tell the difference between angry words and reality? His pathetic expression overlapped perfectly with the man in the last life who ranted about not needing me to save him. I saved him, and he blamed me. I didn't save him, and he still blamed me. Anger surged within me, and I slapped him across the face. You know I'm crazy, yet you dare talk back to me? Do you want to lose your legs again? Hearing that, Leo flinched. So much had happened in quick succession that he almost forgot how miserably he had died last time. I must have lost my mind. I hated women like you before. At least this time, we don't have to be tied together. That's a relief. He was desperately trying to salvage his dignity. Chapter 14. 10 minutes later, Leo's mother rushed in. Leo! His father was away on business and couldn't return, leaving his mother to bear the bad news alone. Auntie, don't be too upset. At least he's alive. Being alive is all that matters. I offered her some token comfort. In my past life, she wasn't bad to me, but she wasn't particularly good either. Before Leo and I got married, she truly treated me like a daughter. After the marriage, she genuinely felt sorry for me, but her sympathy faded over time as her son's size grew heavier. So, when Leo's cousin bullied me, she chose to look the other way. Julia, watch your words. Leo seemed anxious. He didn't want his mother to worry, but now he couldn't even turn himself over. Julia, Leo's father and I are busy, so thank you for taking care of him. Leo's mother held my hand, crying. I know you like Leo, and given his current condition, Her voice trailed off in sobs. I understood what she meant. She was worried no one would want Leo, just like she once worried about me. I spoke bluntly. Auntie, I only see Leo as a brother. Besides, Leo already has a girlfriend. She looked at Leo in disbelief. Julia, is this true? Leo pressed his lips together. He hadn't planned to reveal the truth so soon, but I forced his hand. I added helpfully. I already informed her to come. I don't want to be a homewrecker. I hope you understand. Just as I finished speaking, Clara, dressed in white, appeared at the door. Her reaction was similar to Leo's mother, shock and tears. Leo's mother had met Clara before and didn't like her much, with 2 older sisters and a younger brother. Clara's family wasn't a good match for her son, but given the current situation, Leo's mother had no choice but to make an excuse and leave to buy food. Chapter 15. Leo. Clara's tear-streaked, delicate face evoked sympathy, but Leo avoided her gaze. Julia, you shouldn't have called her here. In this state, how can I? He couldn't finish his sentence as a yellow stain spread across the sheets. Clara instinctively took 2 steps back, a flicker of disgust in her eyes. Leo noticed it, and his pride was shattered. Julia. He looked at me with pleading eyes. I remained unmoved. What? You're not expecting me to help with this, are you? Your girlfriend is here. Isn't this more appropriate? After scolding Leo, I turned to Clara. Miss, I've heard a bit about your romantic story. Since you're so in love, you must be prepared to spend a lifetime together. If that's the case, you should start learning how to take care of a disabled person. Under my urging and moral pressure, Clara reluctantly helped Leo up. The bathroom door slammed shut, but not before I caught the look of resentment on Clara's face. I smiled. Back then, when disaster struck me, they were free to bask in their noble, unfulfilled love. But now, in the face of life's pressures, would their feelings remain as steadfast? Chapter 16. After a few brief words, I left. Leo had his mother and his girlfriend. Naturally, he didn't need me getting in the way. I went on with my life as usual, attending classes, walking, and running freely. The long-lost sense of freedom was intoxicating. I heard that Leo hadn't given up and was doing rehabilitation training every day, but without any progress. Leo's mother contacted me every now and then, often hinting at her dissatisfaction with Clara. She complained that Clara didn't know how to take care of Leo and wasn't as attentive as I had been. Leo also tried to contact me, but I had already blocked all his numbers. 3 months later, while I was having dinner with my lab mates, I ran into Leo and Clara. Chapter 17. Clara was pushing Leo's wheelchair. Both of them looked gloomy. Clara was too busy scolding Leo to notice me at first. What are you doing here? Aren't you embarrassed to show up? Cripple? Her tone of disdain was a stark contrast to her previous gentle demeanor. I couldn't blame her for losing it. I had looked into it and found out that their so-called romance had been a calculated move by Clara all along. Clara came from a troubled family and wanted to find a wealthy man to change her fate. Leo showed up at the perfect time, although I had gotten in the way in the previous life. And in this life? Well, flushed with embarrassment, Leo argued. If I hadn't come, how would I know what you and your friends were saying about me? Clara sneered. That you're a cripple? That you're a useless man? Were they wrong? Look at you. You can't even go to the bathroom without my help. What else can you do? If it weren't for me wanting to escape my family, do you think I'd be with someone like you? Leo's entire body trembled. You, what did you just say? Clara ignored his murderous glare. If I'd known how much trouble taking care of a cripple would be, I would have chosen a different target. Leo roared. Let's get divorced before we even plan the wedding. So they were already legally married. It seemed Leo's mother, aware of his situation, had stopped letting him be picky. Clara punched him twice without hesitation. Divorce? Do you think I haven't thought about it? After 3 months of taking care of you, I'm sick of it. If it weren't for your damn mother, do you think I would have married you? The delicate white flower now revealed her true, vicious nature. But honestly, someone like her was a perfect match for Leo. I couldn't help but laugh. They finally noticed me. Clara, seeing me, quickly pushed Leo away as if he were a burden. You're just in time. Take your brother with you. Back when they were secretly dating, Leo had told Clara I was his sister. Clara shot Leo a cold glance before leaving. I'm going back to the party. Don't cause me any more trouble. Chapter 18. Clara left without looking back, leaving Leo and me staring at each other. What he was going through now was exactly what I had experienced before. Leo, do you remember what your friends used to say about me? Leo turned his head away, his body trembling slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I cut him off. You knew everything. You just didn't care because it wasn't happening to you. All right. Don't look so upset. If you ask me, Clara's actually been pretty decent to you. She just yells at you. At least she didn't sell you to some old man with a fetish, right? I was trying to comfort him, but his face grew paler and paler. No. Julia, let me explain. I never really meant to hurt you. I had everything arranged. The room was set up with sleeping gas so he'd pass out before he could touch you. The next day, we'd just pretend. He rambled desperately until he saw the icy look in my eyes. Actually, back then, I think I had started to fall in love with you. Slap. I hit him as hard as I could, feeling it wasn't enough. I slapped him several more times. Julia! Leo shouted in anger and disbelief, but in his current state, he couldn't fight back. I held back my fury. How dare you talk about love? Selling me off to another man is love? Letting your friends humiliate me is love? Cheating on me is love? You don't love me. You're just a cripple now, abandoned by your so-called soulmate. And all you want is someone who'll worship you unconditionally. Do you really think someone as selfish as you is capable of love? Chapter 19. After that day, Leo never came looking for me again. My life only got better. Occasionally, someone would mention Leo and how miserable he was. I heard that Clara acted like a good wife in front of Leo's mother but treated him harshly behind closed doors, yelling, hitting, and belittling him. Surprisingly, Leo didn't fight back. He just took it. Maybe he really loved Clara. Elise called me a few times, treating me like her confidant. That Clara, I used to think she was so sweet and fragile. But who knew she'd turn out to be so cruel? Julia, I wish you were the one who married my cousin instead. I laughed. Don't talk nonsense. Leo and I are like siblings. Elise scoffed over the phone. You're not real siblings. Auntie just took care of you for a few years. You're not even on the family registry. Julia, why don't you crash the wedding next month on the 10th? Her words made my eyelid twitch. Suddenly, I remembered, before I married Leo in the past life, Elise wasn't that hostile toward me. It was only after the wedding that her attitude changed, and she grew closer to Clara, now that Clara was the one marrying Leo. Could it be? I casually asked. Elise, don't tell me you. Before I could finish, Elise interrupted nervously. Of course not. How could I like my cousin? After a long silence, she mumbled, fine, maybe a little, but he's my cousin. So it's impossible. That's why I want him to marry someone good. Julia, are you sure you're not interested in him? I smiled and brushed her off, saving the recording as I spoke. I'll be there. Elise squealed in excitement. 1 month later, I showed up at the wedding. Chapter 20. I arrived at the wedding just as Clara was pushing Leo out to greet the guests. Leo seemed embarrassed and gritted his teeth. Did you really have to drag me out here? Clara smacked the back of his head. Say one more word, and I'll rip your mouth off. I didn't expect their relationship to have deteriorated this much. To be honest, the only reason they got married was because Leo's mom wanted to punish Clara. When Leo was healthy, his mom would never have allowed someone from Clara's background to get close to him. But now that Leo was crippled, families of equal status didn't want to marry their daughters to him. She had originally wanted me to be her daughter-in-law. But after Leo insisted on being with Clara, she couldn't bring herself to ask me to take him back. Clara's family loved money, so Leo's mom simply paid them 300,000 yuan to buy Clara. Her family happily took the money and handed over Clara's household registration. At first, Clara took care of Leo just for the money, but after being tricked into marriage and realizing she wouldn't get another cent, she felt trapped. Divorce? Not a chance. Wasn't it supposed to be a grand romance? Well, now they were stuck together. Leo spotted me. From a distance, his gaze lingered on my legs, filled with longing. Chapter 21. Leo's mom never showed up. It was a blatant slap in Clara's face. But what I didn't understand was, had his family already given up on him? Sitting at the relatives' table, Elise spotted me and flashed an OK sign. This was her plan, to play a video during the intermission showing moments of my past relationship with Leo. According to her, Leo still had feelings for me. He would feel regret and might even cancel the wedding in public. Not only would it ruin the wedding, but it would also humiliate Clara as much as possible. Of course, Elise conveniently left out how this would also put me in an embarrassing situation. Her intentions were too obvious. So I decided to quietly make a few adjustments of my own. Chapter 22. Well, isn't this Leo's little sidekick? A familiar voice. I turned around. It was Domingo, one of Leo's old friends who used to humiliate me. Tisk. TSK. Look at that expression, still hung up on a cripple. Huh? Do you have some kind of fetish? His words were vulgar and disrespectful, both to me and Leo. Domingo, if you don't want to eat this meal, then get out. Leo appeared beside me without me noticing and scolded his former friend. Domingo looked at him with disdain. Do you still think you're somebody important? Look at yourself, crippled, pathetic. Let me tell you something. Your dad already brought your 12-year-old half-brother home. I was surprised. So Leo's dad had an illegitimate son? It seemed Leo had truly been abandoned. As for his mom, forget it. Domingo, get out. Leo growled, teetering on the edge of losing control, but unable to stand up and hit him. Instead of leaving, Domingo casually sat down. Get out! What are you doing now, Leo? Clara stormed over and kicked his crippled leg. Are you trying to embarrass me even more today? She scolded Leo in front of everyone again. Give him a break, sis-in-law. Let the young master keep some dignity. Domingo laughed. Besides, his old flame is right here. He turned his gaze toward me. I hadn't planned to make a scene, but Domingo was just as despicable in this life as he was in the last. I grabbed a glass of red wine and threw it in his face. As he stared at me in shock, I warned him, say whatever you want about Leo, but keep your mouth clean around me. Otherwise, I won't hesitate to expose the shady things you've done. For example, that little favor you arranged for Leo. In the previous life, Domingo used to introduce girls to wealthy men with twisted preferences. That favor was the person he had lined up for Leo. Hearing this, Domingo immediately shut up, looking as meek as a mouse. Julia. Leo called my name, his voice choked with tears. I'm sorry, I didn't know life as a cripple would be so. Suddenly, the big screen lit up, interrupting Leo's apology. I saw Elise standing up excitedly. Chapter 23. Julia, why don't you crash the wedding on the 10th next month? Elise, don't tell me you. How could I possibly like my cousin? Fine, maybe a little, but he's my cousin. It's impossible for us. That's why I want him to marry someone good. The screen didn't show any visuals, but my conversation with Elise played loud and clear for everyone to hear. The already chaotic wedding turned even messier. Elise screamed for the video to be turned off, but Clara stormed up and started hitting her. She cursed loudly, and even several people couldn't stop her. I clicked my tongue in amusement. After all, how could a girl raised in a patriarchal rural family ever be a fragile white flower? Recalling our calm conversation at the restaurant, her serene and elegant demeanor, I couldn't help but feel it was all a farce. While the scene descended into chaos, I quietly slipped away, leaving behind Leo's desperate calls for me. Chapter 24. I heard what happened later from others. After Elisa's secret feelings were exposed, her parents had a huge fight with Leo's family. They blamed Leo, thinking he must have done something inappropriate to make Elise develop such misguided affection. Leo's already disappointed father finally gave up on him completely. Even his mother reluctantly abandoned him. Fortunately, the illegitimate son's mother had died early, so they decided to treat him as their own and build a relationship while there was still time. Clara was on the verge of a breakdown. Her reputation was ruined, and people openly called her a shrew. She wanted a divorce, but Leo's family refused to let her go. They believed Leo's downfall was all because of her. If she hadn't bewitched Leo, they thought he and I would have been the perfect couple. With my feelings for Leo, how could I not have saved him during that accident? If I had lost my legs instead, Leo could have married me. Such a setup would have been a win-win for their family. Building their reputation, they planned well, but I no longer had even a shred of sympathy for Leo. Chapter 25. 6 months later, Leo committed suicide. Before dying, he took Clara with him. Rumor had it that Clara had secretly connected with Domingo and introduced Leo to an old man with twisted desires. After that, Leo woke up completely broken. He cried, admitting his mistakes and blaming himself for being blinded by desire, while cursing Clara to die a miserable death. In his final moments, he ranted incoherently about turning back time and choosing Julia instead. He hired someone to sneak into his house and replace Clara's daily supplements with sleeping pills. Once Clara fell into a deep sleep, he set the house on fire, burning them both alive. Chapter 26. After Leo's death, I received a letter. It was from Leo. I guessed it was nothing more than some meaningless apologies. I didn't even bother to open the envelope. I threw it straight into the trash. Another chance? Impossible. Fate doesn't give villains a second chance. Even if it did, no matter how many times things repeated, I would never waver for him again. I have clear goals in life. I will only focus on becoming a better version of myself.